What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors goes head-to-head with late-night television's most notorious host, in what starts as a simple interview but quickly spirals into the most controversial moment in talk show history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation that left audiences stunned and one A-list celebrity escorted off set. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think really happened behind the scenes, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about live television. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was supposed to be just another routine promotional stop for Ryan Gosling. He was there to talk about his latest film, charm the audience with his signature quiet charisma, and maybe share a funny anecdote or two. But from the moment he walked onto that stage, something felt different. The studio audience could sense it, the production crew noticed it, and Stephen Colbert, with his razor-sharp instincts honed by years in the business, definitely picked up on it. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the incredibly talented Ryan Gosling," Colbert announced with his trademark grin. But there was something behind his eyes that suggested this wasn't going to be the usual softball interview. Ryan walked out, waved to the crowd, and took his seat. The pleasantries began normally enough. "Ryan, great to have you back on the show," Colbert said, leaning forward in that way that made guests feel like they were in for either a really fun time or about to be dissected on live television. "Thanks for having me, Stephen," Ryan replied, but his voice carried a slight edge that keen observers might have caught. "So, your new film, it's getting incredible reviews. Tell us about the preparation process." This is where things started to shift. Instead of the expected answer about method acting or working with directors, Ryan paused, looked directly at Colbert, and said something that would set the tone for everything that followed. "You know, Stephen, I've been doing this for a while now, and I've noticed something interesting about these interviews. Everyone wants to know about the preparation, the process, the craft, but nobody ever asks about the real cost of making these films." Colbert's eyebrows raised slightly. This wasn't in the pre-interview notes. "The real cost? What do you mean by that?" "I mean the human cost. The way this industry chews people up and spits them out. The way hosts like you, no offense, turn personal. Struggles into punchlines for your monologues." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This was not the Ryan Gosling they were expecting. This was not the charming, soft-spoken actor who usually deflected serious questions with humor. Colbert, to his credit, didn't miss a beat. "Well, Ryan, I think comedy has always been a way for people to process difficult topics. We don't make fun of struggles. We find ways to help people laugh through them." "Do you?" Ryan shot back. "Because I've watched your show, Stephen. I've seen how you take someone's worst moment and turn it into a hashtag. Remember when you spent an entire segment joking about that young actress who had a breakdown? Where's the humanity in that?" The tension in the studio was now palpable. Camera operators were getting signals from the control room, audience members were looking at each other with wide eyes, and Colbert's production team was probably having a collective heart attack. "I think you might be misremembering that segment," Colbert replied, his voice taking on a slightly defensive tone. "We've always been respectful in our approach to mental health issues." "Have you, though?" Ryan leaned forward now, matching Colbert's energy. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you built your entire career on being the smart guy who gets to tear down everyone else. The intellectual bully who hides behind the guise of political satire." The audience was dead silent now. This was not banter. This was not a planned bit. This was two men having a very real, very heated disagreement on live television. Colbert's famous composure was starting to crack. "Ryan, I think you might be projecting some personal issues onto this conversation. We invited you here to talk about your film, not to psychoanalyze my career choices." "And there it is," Ryan said, sitting back with a knowing smile. "The deflection. The way you turn every criticism back on the person making it. You can't handle being challenged, can you, Stephen?" I handle challenges just fine, Colbert replied, his voice rising slightly. What I don't handle well is guests, who come on my show and insult me and my team for no apparent reason. No apparent reason? Ryan's voice was calm, but there was fire behind it. Stephen, you spent 10 minutes in your monologue last week making jokes about actors who take their craft seriously. You called method acting pretentious masturbation. Those were your exact words. The camera caught Colbert's face as he realized Ryan had been paying attention to every word. This wasn't a random attack. This was calculated. That was comedy, Ryan. That's what we do here. We make jokes. At whose expense? Ryan pressed. Always at someone else's expense. You've made a fortune being cruel and calling it clever. The studio was now so quiet you could hear the cameras adjusting their focus. Everyone knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. Colbert's jaw tightened as he processed what Ryan had just said. The host, who had spent years perfecting the art of controlled chaos, was now facing something he rarely encountered. A guest who was completely off script and unafraid of the consequences. You know what, Ryan? Colbert said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. I think we need to address what's really happening here. You didn't come on this show to promote your film. You came here with an agenda. An agenda? Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Stephen, the only agenda I have is calling out the hypocrisy I see in this industry. You sit behind that desk every night, acting like you're some kind of moral authority, but you're just another entertainer profiting off other people's pain. That's rich coming from someone who's made millions playing characters in movies that exploit real human tragedy for entertainment, Colbert fired back, his media training finally kicking in as he tried to regain control of the interview. At least I'm honest about what I do, Ryan replied without missing a beat. I don't pretend my work is some kind of public service. I don't act like I'm saving democracy one punchline at a time. The audience was now completely captivated. Some were filming on their phones, others were just staring in disbelief. This was the kind of television that people would be talking about for years. You want to talk about honesty? Colbert leaned forward again, his voice getting sharper. Let's be honest about why you're really here. Your last 3 films underperformed at the box office. Your personal life has been tabloid fodder for months. And now you're sitting on my show, trying to create a viral moment to get people talking about you again. Ryan's composure finally cracked slightly. You think this is about publicity? Stephen, I could walk away from all of this tomorrow and be perfectly fine. Can you say the same? What happens to Stephen Colbert when people get tired of your act? My act? Colbert's voice was rising now, his famous control slipping. I've been doing this for decades, Ryan. I've interviewed presidents, Nobel Prize winners, leaders who are actually changing the world. And you're sitting here, an actor who pretends to be other people for a living, trying to lecture me about authenticity? Yes, I am, Ryan said simply. Because at least when I pretend to be someone else, everyone knows it's pretend. You've been playing a character for so long, I don't think you remember who you really are underneath all that smugness. The control room was in chaos. Producers were frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial, but the ratings were probably through the roof. This was television gold, even if it was turning into a disaster. You want to know who I really am? Colbert stood up from his desk now, something he rarely did during interviews. I'm someone who uses humor to help people process the darkness in the world. I'm someone who tries to find light in difficult times. What are you, Ryan? Besides someone who's clearly having some kind of breakdown on live television? The personal attack hit its mark. Ryan's face flushed, and for a moment it looked like he might actually walk off the set. But instead, he stood up too, matching Colbert's energy. I'm someone who's tired of watching people like you tear down everything good in this world and call it entertainment, Ryan said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I'm someone who's sick of pretending that cruelty is funny, just because it's delivered with a smile and a college vocabulary. Nobody's being cruel here except you, Colbert shot back. You came onto my show, insulted me, insulted my staff, and now you're acting like you're some kind of victim when I defend myself. Defend yourself? Ryan laughed bitterly. Stephen, you've spent the last 15 minutes trying to psychoanalyze me, questioning my motives, and attacking my career. That's not defense. That's exactly the kind of behavior I'm talking about. The audience was now murmuring among themselves. Some people were clearly uncomfortable with how personal this had become, while others seemed thrilled to be witnessing such raw, unfiltered conflict. You know what your problem is, Ryan? Colbert was pacing now, his usual composed demeanor completely abandoned. You can't handle the fact that some people in this world are actually funny. You've built your entire career on being the strong, silent type because you don't have the wit to engage in actual conversation. And you've built yours on being the class clown who never grew up, Ryan replied. The difference is, I know my limitations. You think your limitations are everyone else's fault. My limitations? Colbert's voice cracked slightly. I've won Emmy Awards, Peabody Awards, I've been nominated for Grammys. What exactly are my limitations? You can't have a real conversation, Ryan said quietly, and somehow his lowered voice carried more weight than all the shouting that had come before. You can't connect with another human being without turning it into a bit. You can't be vulnerable without making it a punchline. That's your limitation, Stephen. You're terrified of being real. The silence that followed was deafening. Colbert stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, as if he was trying to formulate a response but couldn't find the words. The cameras captured every second of his speechlessness. Finally, Colbert found his voice, but it was different now. Colder, more calculated. I think we need to take a commercial break, he said, looking directly into the camera instead of at Ryan. No, Ryan said firmly. We're not done here. Actually, we are done, Colbert said, his voice now carrying the full weight of someone who had just realized he was losing control of his own show. This is my show, Ryan, my stage, and I decide when we're finished. Ryan remained standing, unmoved by the implied threat. Your show, your stage, but this is live television, Stephen. You can't edit out the truth when it's being broadcast to millions of people. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. Audience members were shifting in their seats, some looking toward the exits, others pulling out their phones to capture what was clearly becoming television history. The truth? Colbert's laugh was hollow now, devoid of any of his usual charm. The truth is that you're having some kind of meltdown on my show, and I'm trying to salvage this disaster before it gets any worse. The disaster started the moment. You decided to make this personal, Ryan replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. I came here to have a conversation about the state of entertainment, about how we treat each other in this industry. You turned it into an attack on my character. You attacked my character first, Colbert shot back, pointing an accusatory finger across the space between them. You came here with prepared talking points designed to make me look bad. This whole thing was a setup. A setup? Ryan's composure finally cracked completely. Stephen, you've been setting people up for years. Every guest who sits in that chair becomes part of your performance. You don't interview people, you use them as props for your comedy show. The audience was now openly murmuring, and several people in the front row were standing up, clearly uncomfortable with how heated the exchange had become. Camera operators were looking back and forth between their viewfinders and the control room, waiting for direction that wasn't coming. That's enough, Colbert said, his voice cutting through the noise. Security, I need security up here now. The word hung in the air like a bomb going off. In decades of late-night television, guests were occasionally difficult, sometimes unpredictable, but calling security was nuclear. This was unprecedented territory. Security? Ryan's voice carried a mix of disbelief and disgust. You're calling security because someone finally told you the truth about yourself? I'm calling security because you're clearly unstable and I Have a responsibility to my audience and my crew, Colbert replied, but his voice wavered slightly, as if he wasn't entirely convinced by his own words. Two large men in suits appeared at the edge of the stage, moving cautiously toward Ryan. The cameras caught everything: the confused faces in the audience, Colbert's tight expression, Ryan's calm defiance in the face of being physically removed from the set. "This is what happens when you challenge the system," Ryan said, speaking directly to the camera now instead of to Colbert. "This is how they handle dissent. They don't engage with your arguments. They don't address your points. They just remove you from the conversation. Don't you dare turn this into some kind of political statement," Colbert snapped. "You came here acting erratically, you insulted me and my staff, and now you're being asked to leave. That's not censorship, that's consequences." The security guards were close enough now that Ryan could feel their presence, but he didn't move. Instead, he turned back to face Colbert directly. "Stephen, in 30 years, when people look back at this moment, what do you think they'll remember? Will they remember the host who couldn't handle criticism, or the guest who tried to have an honest conversation about the cost of our entertainment? They'll remember the night an actor had a breakdown on live television and tried to blame everyone else for his problems," Colbert replied. But there was something desperate in his voice now, as if he was trying to convince himself as much as the audience. "Then we'll have to agree to disagree," Ryan said simply. He looked at the security guards and nodded. "I'll leave voluntarily. I don't need to be dragged off like some kind of criminal." As Ryan began walking toward the stage exit, Colbert called after him, his voice carrying across the silent studio. "Ryan, this didn't have to go this way. You could have just talked about your movie like every other guest." Ryan stopped and turned back one final time. "That's exactly the problem, Stephen. Everyone just talks about their movie. No one talks about anything that matters. No one asks the real questions. No one demands better from this industry or from each other. Maybe that's why we are where we are." With that, Ryan Gosling walked off the stage of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, leaving behind a studio full of stunned silence, a host visibly shaken by what had just transpired, and an audience that had witnessed something they would never forget. Colbert stood alone at his desk for several long seconds, the cameras still rolling, clearly trying to process what had just happened. Finally, he looked directly into the camera and spoke. "Well, folks, that was certainly something. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll have our musical guest." But everyone knew that nothing could follow what they had just witnessed. The most explosive confrontation in late-night television history had just unfolded before their eyes, and no one, not even Stephen Colbert himself, seemed quite sure what to do next. The cameras finally cut away, but the damage was done. The internet was already exploding with clips, reactions, and analysis of what would become known as the most controversial interview in television history. What do you think really drove Ryan Gosling to confront Stephen Colbert so directly? Was this a calculated move or a genuine moment of frustration with the entertainment industry? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shape Hollywood. What other celebrity confrontations do you think we should cover next?